This is the 2021 Federal Leaders Debate. How can Canadians know that you are really ready to lead?
We want to put the burden on those that are at the very, very top so we can invest in the solutions that people need. Tackling the climate crisis, investing in housing.
All right, thank you, Mr. Singh. How can you justify an election at this time? Could it not have waited a few months, Mr. Trudeau?
I know you want to go harder and faster on vaccinations. I know you want to go harder and faster on climate change.
Why your party also supports these discriminatory laws.
Those laws are not about discrimination. They are about the values of Quebec. You may repeat as many times as you want that those are discriminatory laws. We are saying that those are legitimate laws that apply on Quebec territory. And
if your own party doesn't fully support you, how can Canadians trust you to lead through?
Being here tonight was not an obvious thing. I've had to crawl over a lot of broken glass to get here.
How can voters trust that it's you and not your caucus that will be in charge?
I am driving the bus to make sure we get this country back on track.
Sexual misconduct in Canada's armed forces continues to run rampant.
We've taken even stronger measures.
If there were more women on this platform tonight, we would have many of the things that we need.
That I won't take lessons on caucus management from you.
And transition to a green economy, uncertain energy supply of oil. Which one of you is best to lead on these complex issues?
I'm not very much interested in leading Canada.
When it comes to leadership, our natural resources sector is a leader.
And what it's going to take is real leadership.
Canada's mission in Afghanistan, what would you have done differently?
You should not have called this election. You should have gotten the job done in Afghanistan.
And sadly, I agree with Mr. O'Toole on this one point.
I agree with Mr. O'Toole that Mr. Trudeau should have put those people's interest before his own.
Well before this election, we were getting flights out of Afghanistan. We got
calling an election under these circumstances was not the right thing to do.
For a first attempt at open debate, our already tense relationship with China.
We need to work with our allies, apply pressure, and make sure that we return these Canadians home.
We have worked with international allies to put pressure on China in every single one of their meetings. Canada's voice has been very strong on that.
Canada's voice has been absent, and we have to get serious with China.
Our long-term care homes here in Canada, we saw the worst conditions in
for-profit. Mr. Singh, we're going to have time to chat with that later. The topic is China, human rights and economic growth. To you, Ms. Paul.
You know, my mom grew up on a farm in a small community, and she learned very young and taught us that you have to give your word to your neighbors, and they have to be able to count on it so that when you need help, they're there for you.
We might name the two Michaels. We might name Uyghur in Xinjiang. The worst of all,
Mr. Blanchet.
Raif Badawi being still held in Saudi Arabia because Canada wants to sell weapons and military supply to Saudi Arabia, which is unacceptable. The Parliament voted.
Okay, gentlemen, one at a time.
Mr. Blanchet is correct.
But he can't convince his candidates to get vaccinated. He can't convince his MPs to follow his
let's keep the theme.
It means standing up for the Uyghur in China. It means standing up to defend people around the world.
On to our next theme, which is climate change.
What immediate actions would you take to make green technology more accessible and affordable?
We propose incentives.
Investing in clean technology.
Pricing carbon to meet our Paris targets. Our low-carbon savings account.
You put a ceiling on any production of oil and gas.
Bring in a national price on pollution that we are going to put a cap on oil sands and oil and gas emissions.
How can we achieve real progress?
We put our plan out in April.
Mr. O'Toole can't even convince his party that climate change is real.
He has never made a target for climate change. We have a
It's
plan
in 2030,
that we will
so
meet
it's
the
actually
targets
quite difficult
and
to
get
meet
our
a target
country
that's 9
back
years
to work.
away.
Describe how you'll implement a national approach that best recognizes the significant regional differences involved.
Invest in a clean economy.
Planetary issue, and it has to be tackled by everybody at once.
A cross-party cabinet to deal with this the way that we dealt with the pandemic, together.
And those fossil fuel subsidies, invest in provinces and territories.
Why are Canada's emissions still going up?
With a concrete plan that the experts have said is the only one that can achieve a 40% reduction.
Which they say you're unlikely to meet.
That is what we're dealing with.
Why the double standard, and what do you say to Canadians who feel that you're blocking their prosperity?
This is all a build-up made by the previously environmentalist Stephen Guilbeault from the Parti libéral, which the Prime Minister did not even know about when he attacked me with it.
Why should Canadians settle for your plan and a plan that would take our targets back in time?
We will make our emission targets, and I think it's important for Canada to have a plan to meet what it signs on to internationally.
The economy still relies on resource extraction, much of which you've said you would shut down completely in your platform. How would you offset the economic harm?
And I think about my brother who was a roughneck out on the oil patch until the bust. I know that we have got to diversify our economy.
A clear answer on your climate roadmap, and will you provide one tonight?
Absolutely, and I'm honored to do so. We've got a bold plan. We are committed
But what is
to
your
ending.
plan, sir?
We'll lay some of it out. One of it is to end fossil fuel subsidies, use that to invest in clean energy.
There will be a cost to this. Why should Canadians trust your party?
There is a global green rush going on now to create the competitive green economy of the future. And so what we want to see is us seizing this opportunity.
If any type of energy is removed from the global market, Canadian energy, it's replaced by a bad actor country that doesn't.
The cost of inaction is forest fires and flooding and heat waves that mean Canadians lose their lives.
We have not missed any of our targets. We are on track to exceeding our targets.
How can I trust and respect the federal government after 150 plus years of lies and abuse to my people?
We have stepped up on the path of reconciliation.
And that every nation has to be recognized as such.
Indigenous sovereignty, self-determination, nation-to-nation engagement, that is my commitment.
And have Indigenous leaders have governance over the federal government finally delivering.
Words, but real action, clean water, nation to nation, and respect.
How are you better positioned than Mr. O'Toole to restore justice?
I am not better positioned than Mr. O'Toole because I believe that this is a relationship between nations.
Actually hold ourselves to account. All parties, all future governments.
What is your plan to end the ongoing disproportionate violence against Indigenous women and girls?
We need to make the space for Indigenous leadership to guide this process.
We worked with Indigenous leaders groups, Indigenous women's groups to co-develop the action plan that we are now fully funding. So we talk
There
about
are kids out there
how
that are being
assess.
fought by you in court.
Leaders, I would actually remind you the question is about violence against Indigenous women and girls.
This is why we need more diversity in politics. This is why we need people who are most directly impacted by issues to be able to speak for themselves.
What will you do as Black leader to address systemic racism? What are you going to do?
Absolutely open to the idea
here,
of discussing all of that on a quiet stage without this aggressivity, being aggressive as this debate has become.
What would you do in the House of Commons to make sure that poverty and trauma issues are addressed?
Which is that the Indigenous leadership is there. It is ready to guide all of these processes. We have all of the recommendations we need.
Why would they believe you a third term, that they would get results and you would be accountable for all that spending?
When we came into office, there were 105 long-term boil water advisories. We lifted 109 of them.
What would you do to ensure Indigenous rights and title are finally respected in this country?
We need to respect Indigenous treaty land and rights. That's a fundamental step towards walking the path of reconciliation in a real meaningful way.
How could Canada build a respectful nation-to-nation relationship with Indigenous people?
Chief Willie Littlechild has agreed to serve as a special counsel to me on the implementation of that to make sure that there are partnerships and opportunities.
You dismantle this broken top-down system, and what would you replace it with that would ensure that Canada still is living up to its constitutional obligations to Indigenous people?
What replaces the Indian Act will vary from community to community as we live up to our obligations.
We've been speaking to people with how we can accelerate treaty resolution.
It's a change. It has to be Indigenous people at the table.
What will they do to help us seniors survive?
To increase the amount of money being provided on a monthly basis to our elders.
We're going to double the Canada Workers' Benefit.
First things we did was increase the guaranteed income supplement for our most vulnerable single seniors when we first got elected. We're doing that again.
If seniors want to contribute by working, that's absolutely their right, but you shouldn't have had to work
around a guaranteed livable income so that whatever your circumstances, you can live with dignity.
That affordability means different things to different people depending on where in the country they live. So when you talk about affordable housing, who are you really talking about?
People who are spending right now more than half their income on housing.
Social lodging, which price are obviously very lower, much lower.
What's your message to Canadians who are struggling to make ends meet?
We need to keep inflation low. There is a crisis hitting families.
We have got to learn the lessons of the pandemic and make sure that we have a social safety net in place that lets everyone live with dignity.
I made a straightforward promise to Canadians that we would have your backs. And that's what we did. During this pandemic, we were there to support people.
You being here, let's try and get some answers this time, shall we? There was an expert panel in British Columbia just recently that said that that is not the way forward. Why do you think this is still a policy worth pursuing?
That it would lift half of the people who are in poverty now out of it, that it was affordable, and that it would not disincentivize work.
Your plan do to create spaces and lower fees, because as you know here, it's not just about affordability, but also about access.
And our plan would help lower income families with up to 75% of the cost. Our plan will be immediate. It will help all Canadian families.
What's more important to you? Helping younger people get access to the market, or allowing older Canadians who rely on the value of their homes to live?
Okay, they are worried about their kids, and the reality is it is impossible for young people to even imagine buying a home.
Why should an increase in seniors go to all seniors?
Paid for a pension that should be the same for everybody. And for some financial issues, the government creates two classes of seniors.
A national pharmacare program. Is it no longer a priority? And should you not just tell Canadians that, sir?
We're going to continue to do with others in respect of the provincial jurisdiction that is delivery of health care. We can't impose pharmacare on a province that doesn't want it.